everyone, this is U.S. Immigration Attorney Sharifa Tharpe. I was live, but I went off and now I'm back. I am here to answer your U.S. immigration related questions, so go ahead and put your questions in the comments. So I have an announcement to make. I was talking about that before, that I will be going live on TikTok every night at 9 p.m. So if you would like to learn about immigration, how to get a work permit, how to get your permanent residence in the United States, then this is the place to be. Just go ahead, follow me, and as soon as I go live, you can hop on with me and ask any immigration related question that you would like to. So I am going to formally introduce myself. I am U.S. Immigration Attorney Sharifa Tharpe, and I help clients to get their status in the United States. So if you are going through the process, you're thinking about the process, or even if you have already been through the process and you would like to go ahead and ask your question, go ahead, put those questions in the comments right now so that I may answer your questions. I am going to be on here every night at 9 p.m. with few exceptions. So you can join me here, you can follow me here, you can also follow me on Instagram, where I will also be going live at 9:30. So if you're here with me at 9 and you want to continue the conversation, you can hop on over to Instagram with me at 9:30 to continue the conversation. So you would have a whole hour of gaining valuable information about getting residence in the US as well as a work permit, and also on how to you can ask your own question, and you can ask as many questions as possible. Now, I usually come with a topic to talk about, and I am going to talk about that, my favorite topic, and it's going to be basically how do you live in the United States? If you're here, you're living in the United States, you're without your papers, what are some of the ways to still fix your situation and get your permission to work, your employment documents, as well as residence in the United States? So I'm going to cover that topic. And now if you notice on my videos repeatedly, I talk about having a US citizen or permanent resident spouse or parent. And that's because they could be the key to fixing your situation where you can gain permanent residence in the United States. Now, there are two ways that this could possibly happen. One is that you could adjust status in the United States. That means to apply for permanent residence while you're in the United States. And then the other is through what's called the waiver process. And that's where it's important to have a US citizen or legal permanent resident spouse or parent. So let's talk about that way that everyone prefers, that way where you can stay in the United States, you can get permission to work, you can get your driver's license or your state ID, and you can get your residence in the US. How is that possible? So there are different ways that you can do this, but there are different ways. I'm going to explain in detail those ways. So the first is if you're the immediate relative of a US citizen. So if you're the immediate relative of a US citizen, that means you're the spouse of a US citizen, you're the parent of a US citizen who's 21 and up, or you are the son or daughter of a US citizen who is under 21 and unmarried, and you came into the country with inspection, meaning you were waved in by an officer or someone at the border, an official at the border, you were paroled in, you were given permission to come into the United States, then this adjustment of status and a permission to work in the United States could very well be a possibility. The way, now, this is the way that the process works. The first is that you have to still qualify in some way. You have to qualify, of course, through your US citizen relative. Now, keep in mind, I just want to take a pause for a minute to tell you that I'm here primarily to answer your questions as well. So any immigration related questions that you may have, You can put those questions in the comments. I like to bring a topic to talk about as well. And today I'm talking about how to apply for residence and permission to work in the US. And even if you don't qualify for that, but you're in the US, how can you still go on, get out of a sticky situation and still go on to get your permanent residence? So this is valuable information that I think you should know about. But by all means, go ahead and put your questions in the comments, because you're my priority and your questions are my priority. So, hi there, Indie Love. It's nice to see you. Thanks for joining in. So now, if this is the way that the process works, Jamaican Berry, thanks for sharing the live. I do appreciate this. So now, the first is that you're going to have to apply for the relevant forms. I don't get into the forms here just because I don't want anybody on my account to go and just start filling out forms without first understanding how they qualify and what those forms are for. However, what the first thing you'll do is you'll apply using the relevant forms. Those forms are going to include adjustment of status. That's going to give you permission. Hi there, Ashley. Give you permission to stay in the US and apply. You're going to also, if you qualify for adjustment of status, a work permit application will also be included, as well as a travel document. So that's also something that is possible for you to get permission to come back to the US should you need to leave in the first place. As well as, so work permit, adjustment of status, the petition that your relative or even your employer would file, and then the travel document, employment authorization. Now, after those are filed, you'll do a biometrics appointment. That's a fingerprinting appointment for the background check. And then shortly thereafter, the work permit comes. Right now, I shouldn't say shortly thereafter, because right now it's taking 6 to 8 months. So an average of 6 months, it can range from 6 to 8 months. I've seen as long as 9 months. So, be prepared for that work permit to come within that period of time. And it could be longer. It just depends on what's going on in your particular situation. But then the work permit, and then that gives you some sort of relief, because then you're able to work, you have a form of identification. And it feels sort of, even though it doesn't give you status, it does feel reassuring to know that you now have some form of U.S. identification. Once you have your work permit, the next step then would be for your interview to be scheduled. So once your interview is scheduled, you would attend the interview. And sometimes they waive it just depending on the type of relationship. So with marriage-based, they almost never waive the marriage base unless you're renewing the 2-year to the 10-year. However, with other types of relationships, such as a parent filing for a child, or a child filing for a parent, those sometimes are waived. So it depends. But if you have to go to the interview, you want to make sure you go with the right evidence and be prepared for those questions. Now, especially in marriage-based cases where you will need to answer questions about your marriage, very important that you and your spouse prepare. Make sure you understand, you know the basic information within your marriage, your relationship. You know when you met. Yes, because sometimes at least one person in the relationship does forget when they met. Sometimes one person forgets the anniversary. And so, sometimes one person is not very detail oriented in the marriage, and that can create a problem at the interview. So at the interview, it's very important that you talk about your routines. Make sure the both of you are on the same page. Make sure you take your evidence, especially if you did not submit sufficient evidence to begin with. So when at the beginning of this application, it's so very important to submit all the good evidence from the beginning. If you don't, it can lead to a request for evidence, it can lead to a denial at the interview, and it can lead to a delay in your case. So, hi, how can I apply for a US green card for myself? I am a Trinidadian. So there are different ways, but I'm going to give you the overview. So the first is through employment. So if you have been recruited by an employer or you have an employer who's willing to apply for you, yes, employers can file for their employees permanent residence. Of course, the employer has to really be invested in that employee. And so that's a conversation you'll first have to have with your employer before you get to the next steps. But there are various types of employment based. So there are employment based green card permanent resident for unskilled workers, for skilled workers, for professionals, for for those with extraordinary ability and exceptional ability, for professors, for researchers. So there are so many different types, and it really depends on your qualifications, the need of your employer, and the need of your of the US. Now, the extraordinary ability permanent residence is one way to come to the United States on your own, if we're talking about applying for it on your own. If you can show that you have extraordinary ability, that means that you're at the top of your field. That's one way to self-petition for yourself, meaning you submit your own application. Now, extraordinary ability means that you are well known in your country, well known internationally for a particular field. And keep in mind that these fields could be science, arts, business. So it's not education. So it's not necessarily just limited to, being a celebrity or sports, as well as athletes. So it's very flexible, and the professions are very flexible. Musicians have gotten it. Judo coaches have gotten it. Martial arts experts or coaches have gotten it. Horse breeders have gotten it. Wine tasters have gotten it. So research marketers have gotten it. So this can definitely work. But the important thing is you must show that evidence that backs up that you're at the top of your field. Now let's go to some of the more common field areas. Now, if you said for yourself, so one way is if you have absolutely no ties, no employment prospects, no family members, no other way to get here, no link here, then the next thing would be to apply for the diversity lottery. That is basically the lottery for the green card. The Department of State opens up their website for you to go ahead and sign up. And if you're selected, you have a shot at becoming a permanent resident. Hi, how can I apply for a U.S. green card for my, okay, so, hi, good afternoon. So my husband filed for my 11-year-old child in 2019 in November 2020. I got okay, so Ruthie, I lost the other part of your question. Can you retype that part of your question, please? I didn't see the rest. Hi, what documents am I supposed to take to my green card interview? So, Mrs. Kemp, it depends on what type of green card interview you're doing. If this is a marriage-based interview, then you're going to want to take all the documents that are listed on your interview notice. So follow meticulously the interview notice and what they tell you to take. You're still going to also, I don't know your case, and so this is general information. And so keep in mind that some of the things that I list myself may not be necessary at the interview because I have not seen your case. And I don't know what you should be, I know generally what should be taken. But in your case, I don't know what you have, what you don't have. And so you want to make sure that you take updated evidence of the marriage. If we're talking about a marriage base, make sure you take your original civil documents. So these are going to be your birth certificate, your marriage certificate, your children's birth certificate, your husband's birth certificate, your original divorce decrees or certified divorce decrees, in case the officer does ask for them. You're going to want to take updated tax records of the petitioner. And this is just, of course, continue to support the affidavit of support. as well as additional evidence of the marriage. So that's going to be pictures, photographs, updated photographs. If you've bought new property together, if you've had a child, because it's taking so long, people can have children while the permanent resident process is going forward. So those are just examples. But my advice to you would be definitely to at least start with that interview notice. If my son's father filed for him in the US, does he have full custody or rights over me for my child? So that is going to be a family law question. However, if you consent to your son going to the United States and your son moves to the United States with the father, then he will be in the father's custody, and that can get sticky because if you're in a foreign country and the son is in the US, then that father is going to, of course, have physical custody of the child at the time. And so you want to consult an attorney, a family law attorney in your country or in the US who can advise you on what your custodial rights would be or how to enforce your rights. What the requirements for a green card holder to apply for his children over 21 and 18 years old. So a permanent resident, Mrs. Kim, thanks for sharing. So the requirements, now the requirements in this case with a parent-child is to show the relationship, prove the relationship. Sometimes that's as little as a birth certificate, and sometimes it does require a paternity test or a DNA test to show that there is indeed that parental relationship. And even sibling relationship, when in the case where a sibling is sponsoring their sibling. Now, keep in mind, though, the difference here is that a permanent resident can apply for their children. 1 over 21, they can apply for them as long as they're unmarried, and 1 is 18, they can apply for them. And they're under, if that child is under 21, the process is actually moving faster. There is no wait list for children of permanent residents, and what that means is that it's taking about 2 years rather than it was taking longer than that. Now it's taking 2 years, could be less, and so it's a faster process. But that 18-year-old has to be unmarried. The 21-year-old, however, over 21-year-old child, that is taking 5 to 6 years, unfortunately. How long does filing take for a father citizen to file for their married daughter living in Jamaica? Right now it's taking 12 years in the law, so it's taking a longer time. What happens if I get a speeding ticket paid a month to my oath ceremony? So Silla 1, now, if it's just a speeding ticket, it's highly unlikely that it's going to cause any further consequences. Just take your proof of that you've paid it. Take proof of the ticket and the proof that evidence that you paid that ticket. And you will probably have to disclose that out of an abundance of caution on your oath ceremony form. Now, keep in mind, this is general information. I don't know what, so Silla 1, that's where you get legal advice. Because the information here I'm giving you is general information. And so I cannot tell you whether to disclose it or not without knowing the full circumstances of, is it just a speeding ticket? Are you assuming it's just a speeding ticket? These is where it's very important to get legal advice and talk through it. Now, my consultations are $150 for up to an hour. And if this is definitely a case where you want to talk about what happened, the situation, and get a full evaluation and determine whether you need to disclose it. Now, out of an abundance of caution, it would not necessarily be a bad idea, but keep in mind that to protect yourself, you should get legal advice, personal legal advice, because I don't know your situation. I'm not your attorney, and so I can't give you legal advice. So you need to get a consultation, get legal advice, at least to understand how it will affect you, whether it will even affect you, and to get some reassurance, knowing that this is more accurate legal advice. Now, if you would like to go ahead and schedule a consultation, you can do that by calling 561-405-4889 to schedule a consultation and get personal legal advice. Because the information here I'm giving you is valuable information, but it's general information. That means that it's not necessarily applicable to you because I'm not your attorney and I don't know what your particular circumstances are. So always best to be careful and get personal legal advice. So keep your questions coming because that is exactly why I'm here. I'm here to answer your U.S. immigration related questions. So continue to put your questions in the comments so that I may answer. Now, I have been talking about ways to go ahead and still get permanent residence. If you've been living here, if you've overstayed, if you don't have your papers, ways to still go about getting your permanent residence, and even getting permission to work in certain cases. So I have talked about that, being an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, how you can stay in the U.S. if you are the immediate relative of a U.S. citizen and you are inspected, paroled, or given some sort of permission to come through the border. And so keep in mind, this may even include being waived in. So you may not have presented your papers, but you were waived in with a whole bunch of people. That could possibly count. So it's whether or not you could possibly adjust for status, qualify for adjustment of status, could vary just depending on even your experience at the border. Now, if you came into the country and you snuck across the border, you weren't inspected, an officer did not waive you in, you were not given any kind of permission to come into the country, then it is likely that you will not qualify for adjustment of status, even if you're the immediate relative of a U.S. citizen. So so here are the two ways that here's one way you could adjust status, and here's another way, or two more ways that you'll probably have to apply for what's called a waiver, and I'll explain that process. So if you're the immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, the spouse of a U.S. citizen, the parent of a U.S. citizen, or the son or daughter, and parent of a U.S. citizen who is 21 and up, that's very important to take note of, 21 and up, that U.S. citizen. Having a child here is not necessarily going to qualify you for residence or permission to work. The key is that that child has to be 21 and up. And so also, if you're the child of a U.S. citizen under 21 and unmarried, and you came into the country with some sort of permission, even if you were waived in, you walked across the border at the officer's gesturing you to come in, that could possibly qualify as inspection at the border. It's called inspection at the border. And so that could qualify you to adjust status, even if you're out of status in the U.S. Now, if you came across the border, snuck, no inspection, you snuck across the border, you weren't caught, for example, and you've just been living here without papers after sneaking into the country, then that's probably going to qualify you, or you're probably going to have to go through the waiver process to be able to fix that situation, even if you are the immediate relative of a U.S. citizen. So if you married a U.S. citizen, can your husband file for you and kids at the same time? So yes, so as long as the kids and you qualify through your spouse, your spouse can file for you and the kids at the same time. Keep in mind that you just want to make sure that you qualify for the affidavit of support, that your spouse can meet the requirements of the affidavit of support. And that's basically that form that shows the income of your spouse and that the spouse can support you as well as the children if they come to the United States, can support them over the next 10 years or until you or the children become U.S. citizens. That is where you have to make sure, because that could be, and it's always best to get legal advice. So call now if you are listening here and you really would like to get a consultation tailored for you. Call 561-405-4889. There is an after hours receptionist who is available to take your call. Shanisa, thanks for sharing the live, or thanks for the follow. Let's see. Citizenship interview canceled last month, but NW showing no one has appeared for. So that could be a mistake, and you just want to call them and straighten that part out. So that's where I would advise you contact them about your case and work on getting it straightened out. What does it cost if a sibling that's a citizen wants to sponsor? So the starting cost is $535 for that initial petition. So where the U.S. citizen sibling sponsors the immigrant sibling. Now, when it gets to the embassy, right now that could always change because the process takes so long. It is a 14-year process for a U.S. citizen sibling to file for a sibling. And so you are looking at a 14-year process where the fees could always change somewhere down the line. But the first right now is $535 for the starting petition. And then, of course, there are the other fees. Once they're ready to process your case and it gets to the National Visa Center, you'll get an invoice. Right now, that invoice is $445. Yeah, exactly, Joey. That is very, very frustrating. I know it is. Now, keep in mind that it's 14 years in the Caribbean. But in Mexico, it is as over 20 years for siblings, so it's a long time. In the Philippines, I believe it's 19 years. So it's a very frustrating thing. And if it's the only way that your sibling is going to qualify, then by all means go for it. But you'll have to be very invested. Can a parent with a green card sponsor? Yes, so a parent with a green card can sponsor their children, but they have to sponsor unmarried children. The children cannot be married. Under 21, it's taking, if they're under 21, it's taking about 2 years, or prepare for a 2-year process. It could be less because there's no wait list right now. However, if they're over 21 and unmarried, it's taking about 5 to 6 years. 592G1. Can I expedite letter file to the NVC because it's been forever for my sister waiting for her? So it depends on what your circumstances are. You could definitely submit a request to expedite, but you're going to have to include evidence and it's going to have to meet their criteria to expedite. So for example, is it urgent? Is there a humanitarian issue? Is there a conflict in the country that is turning into a dire situation for your sister? So it would have to involve things of that nature, things compelling, emergencies. So keep that in mind. Great questions so far. Keep your questions coming. I am here to answer your U.S. immigration related questions. So put those questions in the comments right now. And I will also be here at 9 p.m. tonight. And I'll be on Instagram at 9:30. On Instagram, I have the same handle. It's The Immigration Attorney. So if you join me at 9, so you follow me, join me at 9. And as soon as you see me go live, you can hop on and ask your questions. Continue to ask your questions. Or if you think of your questions, then you can hop on and ask. And if you want to continue the conversation, you can also hop on over to Instagram. Follow me on Instagram as well, and then I can continue to answer your questions. Now I have a few more minutes here, so go ahead and put your questions in the comments. I'm just going to go ahead and finish up the topic that I came to talk about, but keep in mind that you should still go ahead and put your questions in the comments, and I'll continue to prioritize your questions as they come in. Now, now I was talking about adjusting status. Now, what if you can't adjust status? What's the next option? You're here in the US, but you can't adjust status. That means you can't stay in the US and apply for permanent resident. Then what do you do next? Well, it depends on what your priority date is, 592G1. So now, if we are talking about the F2A, then that is current right now. But if you're talking about the F2B, that is not current and is taking about 5 to 6 years. What are the process after a spouse files for his partner? So after the spouse files for the partner, then the next step, it depends on where they are. So if the partner is abroad, then they're going to wait to see if the petition is approved. If the petition is approved, then it gets moved to the National Visa Center, and the National Visa Center works with you or your attorney to gather additional documents. And when they're satisfied, they send it to the embassy and then schedule the interview. So if they're here in the US and they're doing adjustment of status, then they're going to do the biometrics. So after applying, they're going to do the biometrics fingerprinting appointment. Then, and that's to do the background check. And then the work permit, if you applied or qualified for the work permit, usually it comes in the mail about 6 to 8 months. And then after that, I would say it depends on how you qualify. So they already send 120 and 60-day pre-interview. So 5 and 9 to G1, this is where you can schedule a consultation or you can contact them directly to determine what is going on with your case. Because at this point, I would not be able to advise you specifically about, how to follow up what the next steps are without being the attorney on the file. So just make sure that you're on top of your case, make sure that you have submitted everything they need, and then make sure that you are communicating with the National Visa Center so that they don't close the case for abandonment. So now if the spouse is here, I was answering the question about what is the process after a spouse files for his partner. The biometrics, so the fingerprinting appointment to do the background check, and then the work permit, and then the interview. Now, if we're talking about adjustment of status, then it's taking about 18 months to 24 months. So can't stress enough how important it is to have a good application and file a complete application to avoid delays, to avoid requests for evidence, which leads to longer processing times, delays, and even denials. So very important that you consider that. So thanks everyone for your questions. These were all great questions, and I'm going to be back at 9 p.m. tonight. And I'm going to be here at 9 p.m. every night to answer your questions with very few exceptions. So go ahead and put your questions, or rather follow me, because I'm going to head out now. Follow me. And as soon as I come live, you can hop on with me and ask your questions, and you can plan on it now. It's going to be at 9 p.m. on TikTok, and it's going to be 9:30 on Instagram. So if you're here with me and you want to continue the conversation, you can hop on over to Instagram. I have the same handle, The Immigration Attorney, for Instagram. Thanks, everyone, and I will see you later on. Bye-bye.